Thank you. Um, so I just want to mention that the Advancing Women in Science group also has an event coming up this coming Tuesday, so next week at 4:30 p.m. We're going to have a resource sharing happy hour at 4:30 on Zoom. The idea is that everybody can bring their own cool resource to share and tell other people about, and together we'll put together sort of a list of neat resources that might be relevant to each other. And that could be anything from a new bakery that's opened up in your neighborhood to a very cool, maybe list of, or a resource where you could find a diverse set of speakers to talk on a certain subject. There's all kinds of resources like this popping up online, and I think it's a bit hard to keep track of them. So we're gonna have resource sharing happy hour on Tuesday at 4:30. On that note, we are with Holly and Monyssha today. I'm not going to introduce them because they're going to spend a lot of time introducing themselves. And they're going to speak for about 15 minutes or so each, and then we're going to have a lot of time for question and answer and sort of open discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Holly. Take it away.
All right, here we go. Let's see how much I can share in 15 minutes. So hello, thank you to everyone that is here. I'm super grateful that you're here and glad to see those that I know, especially from UNM. And thanks to Stephanie and Advancing Women in Science for putting this together. I think it's really fantastic, actually, and very admirable in 2020 that you've made this your priority. And not only did you seek out a racially diverse set of speakers, but you also are paying us. So thank you for that, and thank you for the departments that sponsored that happening. I think that says a lot, and I really respect it. So thank you, thank you. All right, so I'm going to tell you my story. I'm Holly Olivarez. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Colorado Boulder. I graduated from UNM a year ago, and I was in the Earth and Planetary Sciences department. Shout out to those that are on the call from EPS today. And so now I live in Colorado and I'm getting paid to get my PhD. And so my undergraduate studies were very difficult for me, but I stuck with them and it paid off. So telling you about me, I grew up in the North Valley of Albuquerque, New Mexico. I attended Cibola High School through 9th grade, and then life happened, and I was never around academia, math, or science. I had kids and a career, and I never knew that I would be sitting here. That is for sure. But here I am. About 5 years ago, I got my GED, and I didn't know it at the time, but by doing so, I qualified for the New Mexico State Lottery program, where most of my bachelor degree was paid for. And I didn't know that that was available to me because I'm not the typical age and I hadn't just graduated high school. But the way the state lottery program works is if you start undergraduate studies the semester after you graduate or high school equivalency, then the state lottery program will pay for most of your bachelor degree. So quite literally in one day, I went home to my family and said, I'm going to college. And I had a complete life change happen one day. It's just like winning the lottery. So that was pretty cool. So I started attending classes at community college, CNM on the west side. And I changed my major 3 times before I knew which program was the right one for me. While I was at community college, one of my instructors forwarded an email to everyone in our class. It was a math class about a 4-week paid internship, summer internship at UNM called SCORE. And so I decided to apply for it. I was really nervous and I even talked to the instructor and he said, just go for it. And so I applied for it and I got it. And that really changed what I was doing in the academic setting. So during those 4 weeks, I was able to spend time at UNM in the summer when there weren't as many people on campus. I was super nervous about being around such large crowds of people. Even though I grew up in Albuquerque, I was never around UNM. I grew up in the North Valley, and it's a little bit, it was a little bit slower pace and just less people, and that's what I was used to. So it worked out to be really great for me to spend time on campus over the summer. I also got into a routine of going to campus every day, and I also started to learn how to do research. And in my application for the internship, I said I was interested in statistics and climate change. Didn't know anything about statistics, but I was interested in studying climate change, or at the time, global warming is what I called it, because it seemed like the biggest problem that we face. And I was interested in finding out more about it. And so I figured if I got the skills in statistics, then maybe I could help learn and understand climate change. And so because I put that in my application, I was paired with a scientist in the Earth and Planetary Sciences department who studies past climate using items from nature, specifically structures from caves. So for my research, I was only running statistical analysis, and I didn't actually do anything with items from caves. I worked on a laptop, but I did learn enough to see that studying items from nature, the way that he does and the way that his team does, and other scientists that study past climate, like Peter, who's on the call, that's how we know that our climate today is different than it was in the past, and that it has changed. It is changing at all times, but it's also how we know that humans are the cause for most of the climate change that we're seeing today. And I was convinced. So I stopped thinking that I needed to get my degree in statistics in order to study climate change, and I understood that I could do this by way of being a scientist. And so I changed my major just from that 4-week experience at UNM. I felt really clear that I knew what I wanted to do after that. After all that not knowing, and after changing my major so many times and not being clear, I suddenly felt clear. And so I think that's an important thing to think about when you're an undergrad is everybody says things will fall into place and you'll figure it out, and you never believe them, but it does actually finally happen. So once I made that shift, I decided I wanted to study the climate system, and I wanted to figure out what to do about climate change. So I went from being really scared about attending the big university to being really excited to work on this really big problem. And my fears about the big university got smaller. Not that my fears about climate change got bigger, but I will say, going into classes and starting to talk about how Earth works, I realized how behind I was in my understanding. And so I had big challenges in that way for several reasons, but I ultimately decided to just be honest about it. I found friends to talk things through with, and shout out to those who are on the call today, especially my best buddy, Wade, who I would not be here today without. And I went to office hours, I talked to instructors, and I told them that I might need a little bit more explanation because they assumed I knew what my classmates did about Earth's history. And I'm a little older than my classmates, and so I think it was easy to assume that maybe I knew more than my classmates. But when it comes to knowing how Earth works, I just didn't. I didn't grow up in a family that talked about science or evolution for that matter. My family was very much in support of the idea of creation without evolution. And so I was kind of behind the curve a little bit in talking about the history of Earth and the history of what we know of our universe. So I share that because I think it's another point that I learned that I think is good to talk about, and that's that I had to learn how to be honest about my being nervous and honest about the things that I didn't know. And sometimes that's hard to do in the academic setting when you're in a place when it looks like so many people around you know so much. But what I found was that because I was willing to be honest, even though I was nervous and shaking sometimes when I would tell people I didn't know things, what I found is that they were really caring, and they actually did want to help me. And I think they want to help all of us. And sometimes I think without us stopping to have those real conversations, then those assumptions can be made. Well, like, everybody knows this stuff, we're just going to keep moving on. And there's really no marker or measure to do it any different. And so by me taking that time to be like, hey, I really don't know, like, can you explain it to me a different way? Because I really just don't get it. That changed the conversation a little bit. So over time, I stopped worrying about being nervous, and I started focusing on actually understanding the material. And I started to get more confident in my understanding of the material, and I got more confident in my abilities. So in that time, once I transferred to UNM, I also started to hear about paid summer internships that people can do out of state. And I wasn't sure about doing that because I planned to stay in New Mexico, but I went ahead and decided to apply because I heard that I heard about some internships where I could study more about the climate system, and I was motivated by that. So I got help from multiple mentors with my application because I didn't have experience other than that 4-week internship application, and they helped me, and I got in. And I went to Colorado for the summer, and it was the longest time I had been away from home, 10 weeks. I grew up in Albuquerque and always lived in Albuquerque, a little bit in Santa Fe, but mostly just in the same place. And so even though I have 2 children and I'm an adultier adult in some ways, I very much wasn't in the ways of leaving my hometown and moving away for 10 weeks. And I was super nervous about it, but I did it. It was hard. My kids came to visit me and that helped me feel better. But I did it, and it actually really changed my life in many, many ways. And so because of that, I'm recommending that anyone here that's an undergrad apply for summer internships for every summer that you're in school. And feel free to ask me more questions about this later, because I can tell you lots and lots more. And I can even tell you about some great programs that are available for you that you will be happy that you participated in. So among many, many good things that happened, the summer internship that I went to helped me to get ready to apply for graduate school, which is also something I never thought I would do. Even when I had gotten the lottery to pay for my bachelor degree, I thought that was going to be it. I would get my bachelor degree and then I would go get a job. But once I started learning that I had the opportunity to get paid to get my graduate degree, I thought, well, why not? I'm going to apply. But I had so many questions. Like Jess, who's on the call today, I asked her one time, do you have to clock in? Like, what do you do all day? What do grad students do? Do you take classes? Do you have a boss? I have no idea what graduate school actually means, and I don't know how to find out. And so Jess helped me a lot, and talking to Jess really helped me get more confident to ask even more questions. And so I actually just put together a flyer and emailed it to the chair of our department and said, can I host a meeting where we ask graduate students or faculty about graduate school, because I have so many questions. And if I have this many questions, then other undergrads have to have this many questions too. And Peter said, yeah, absolutely, we'll provide the pizza. And we had like 20 some people show up, and we asked so many questions, and it was fantastic. So that's something else I'll plug for, is like, don't be afraid to ask questions. There are a lot of people that are really willing to help, but they don't know how to answer a question you don't ask. So a lot of times it does fall on you, the undergrad, but when you take the initiative, you will be so glad that you did. You're really investing in yourself, right? So let's see. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is that before I applied to graduate school, I had to take the GRE, which is an exam that everyone is required to take that is going to apply for graduate school. It is terrible, and there are hundreds of people working to get it abolished as a requirement for graduate school, and I'm very grateful for that, including people in Earth and Planetary Sciences. So thank you for your work, and thank you to Stephanie for her work in the anthropology department. Very exciting. So hopefully you'll never even have to take it if you haven't yet. But I took it and I scored very poorly on the math. I did get my associate's degree in mathematics at community college, and I still scored poorly on the math. So I took the GRE a second time and I scored even worse. And I was completely devastated, and I thought I wouldn't get into any graduate programs. But I kept showing up for classes and other obligations. I whined and cried a lot to my friends. Thank you, Wade, for listening. But ironically, during the same time, I also applied for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. It's a highly competitive fellowship, and my mentor from the summer internship in Colorado recommended that I try to apply. I see you, Stephanie, thanks. And she said it was a good opportunity to learn how to write a proposal. So I did. So months went by. My applications were out the door. I was very tired. I was feeling like I wouldn't get into grad school. I've only told a few people this, but I even applied for a few jobs because I didn't think I would get into graduate school. But fast forward to February and March of my senior year, and I was accepted into 5 of 7 programs that I applied to. And I got the National Science Foundation Fellowship. And some days I still have to pinch myself that this is my story. So I went from not having a high school education to deciding to become a scientist, and then getting a prestigious fellowship with 5 offers for grad school. And all the while changing and growing as a person. I even cut off all my hair while I was in school. So a lot has happened. And so from there, I'm now running out of time. So I'll just tell you the short version of the rest, which is I decided to go to Colorado for graduate school with the mentor that I had been paired with for my summer internship. She and I are a really good match to this day. I'm very, very happy that I chose her as my advisor. And I study the exchange of carbon dioxide between the ocean and the atmosphere. I use a laptop to study the global ocean, even while I live in the mountains. And I love my work. It's really meaningful to me. I'm learning the climate system, and I'm learning it in a way that I can explain it to people that don't study it. And I also got very motivated to also talk about what we can do about climate change. And so I give a lot of talks on this. And even though I don't have my PhD, I feel very qualified to talk about how I'm passionate about what to do about climate change. And I'm qualified to talk about talking about climate change. And so I give a lot of talks like that. And the first one that I hosted was during my undergrad, my senior semester. And Peter, who's on the call today, is the chair of our program, and he agreed to be the scientist at my talk to tell everybody about the climate system and about climate change. And so thanks for that support. That really boosted my confidence. And now I host events even on my own, and I'm not even nervous at all. So I've come a long way. Then the last thing I'll just say is that I do a lot of activism work at Colorado University that I'm at, and I'm very happy to talk about that during the Q&A because I think I'm out of time. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly. And Monyssha, we'll turn it over to you.
Well, that was great hearing from you, Holly. It sounds like we have a lot of really similar experiences as far as certain aspects of our education go. So
nice.
Yeah.
Monyssha, I don't think your earbuds are working. Either that or you just sound really quiet.
Is that better?
Nope. It started to work for a second. It's like it's not plugged in all the way or something.
Oh, I unplugged it.
Ah, yeah, that's better.
Is that better? Can you guys hear me better? Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry. Thought my headphones would work, but I guess not. Yeah. But anyway, hello everyone. My name is Monyssha. For those of you who I haven't met personally, I am from Cochiti Pueblo. I am Cochiti and Laguna on my father's side, and Santa Clara, Hickory, Apache, and Dene on my mother's side. I grew up in Cochiti Pueblo, which is just a small village located just southwest of Santa Fe on the Rio Grande. It's a very beautiful area, especially one to grow up in. You know, lots to do, is never bored. Don't visit now, please. But eventually, you know, it's a really beautiful area. When I got older, I went to Rio Rancho Public Schools, and after graduating, enrolled at the University of New Mexico. I started in media arts, and just like Holly, jumped around through many majors. I think I changed my major about 4 or 5 times that I can remember, and eventually ended up in anthropology after kind of realizing it was the only program that excited me, because I got to learn about other cultures that weren't that different from mine. And that was really comforting as someone who spent a lot of time in their core classes really questioning the narrative of a lot of material. That being said, however, I only lasted in anthropology for about a year. After that, I left school. I worked a bunch of different service jobs. I decided to go back to school in 2016. And even that was a decision that I didn't make lightly. I knew I wanted to finish, but at that point, I had been out of school for about 7 years, I think 6 or 7 years. And I was just learning how to deal with some of the traumas I had experienced as a Native woman, just essentially living my life. I had been fired from a job because of my cultural background. I had been fired from another job for requesting ceremonial days off. I have been refused service in restaurants plenty of times. It still happens. I have worked in coffee shops where people have told me they want enough cream in their drink until it's the color of my skin. And unfortunately, these types of incidences aren't uncommon, but they're the ones that get the most attention, I think, because people can contextualize a shocking narrative. But under the surface of all that, just existing as a Black, Indigenous person of color, you're living in a world just surrounded by microaggressions. And they're just, happening in a real thousand cuts fashion and eating away at you. And it's really hard to keep track of and kind of keep yourself in check with all of that going on. And it was all of the recurring microaggressions in the archaeological record that initially caused me to leave anthropology. So by the time I had gone back to school, I felt a bit more mentally prepared to handle the bias narratives I knew I would be forced to learn in order to graduate to study my own culture and have people call it science. So I think re-entering the program with that kind of mindset was an advantage for me, or self-preservation, if you will. But I think just having that kind of real world experience made me realize, this is going to happen wherever I am. I might as well complete my education and do something about it. And so let me share my screen. I want to share the pictures that I have.
Just look at the bottom of your screen for the green share screen bar. Did you find it?
Here we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Are you guys just seeing this? Or
Yeah.
are you seeing my whole computer?
No, we can just see a window with files listed.
Oh, you can't see the picture?
No.
Damn. Okay, hold on. Okay, maybe this is not going to work. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing.
That's okay. Try selecting the share screen and then it should give you some options. And one will show you like just a window and then the other ones will show you like your whole desktop screen.
So just share my whole desktop then.
Yeah, do that and then you can
if you also
expand.
want, you
there we
can,
go.
if you go to like that Google Drive page you sent, like those just like flip through.
There
you
we
go.
We're
This
good.
works.
Perfect.
Okay, are you seeing my whole screen?
Yeah, but we can see the photo as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so these are just some of the pictures I have. I don't take a ton of pictures, and I've recently started taking more of my life, but here are some from places I've been. This first group of photos is from my time at field school. So, and again, these are just background pictures because, otherwise I've got people just looking at my face. But so my first year back at UNM, I helped to recharter the undergraduate anthropology society. And it's really thanks to the extracurriculars that I was involved in that I felt like I could actually contribute something to my own education and gain something valuable from it, because I didn't always feel like that was the case in the classroom. I also declared geography as my second major, and that helped me feel a bit more secure as a scientist, because geographic information science is almost entirely an objective science, and working with information and tools that allowed me to visually represent data was great, because I didn't feel I had to justify my work as often as I did in anthropology. So seeking different forms of growth and development outside of my program is really where I gained the most from my education. I essentially was forced to learn how to create my own opportunities. I learned how to network. I learned how to ask for money from a colonized institution and get it. And, I think most importantly, from someone I personally greatly admire, I learned how to communicate effectively. And so that first summer being back at school, I attended field school at Crow Canyon Archaeological Center in Colorado, where these first pictures are from. And this particular image is from the unit I was excavating in. After leaving field school, I worked at Chaco Culture National Historical Park, and that's where these next group of pictures are from. So I finished my final year at UNM and then immediately left after graduation for Alaska, where I worked for the summer season. When I returned, I went back to work at Chaco, and when I finished there, I began working in the private sector of cultural resource management, which is where I'm at now. So cultural resource management is essentially archaeology for land management, and that takes a lot of different forms, but basically anytime anything active is going to happen on public lands, an archaeological crew needs to walk through all of the proposed project areas and record any material culture or sites and make recommendations for how the project should or shouldn't proceed. And this type of work is completed by both private and public institutions. Land management within institutions like the Park Service or the Forest Service consists of park archaeologists, among other things, monitoring site conditions and making recommendations for when and where conservation efforts need to be concentrated. In the private sector, cultural resource management is more or less a step in the construction process. So sometimes it is for the benefit of the community or people by creating access roads or installing water pipelines, but sometimes it's about where a drill or extraction site can be located. These next few photos are from my work in Alaska. They're not all pretty because I did work with the Bureau of Land Management on projects in the National Petroleum Reserve, which is located on the north slope of Alaska, where big oil companies are actively drilling. But I worked with different departments while I was up there. There are 3 departments managed in one office in Fairbanks, Alaska. So I was the archaeological assistant for all 3 offices. And so I got to see some really, really incredible places because each office manages different lands. And so anyway, for the past year and a half, I've worked with different firms that do different kinds of work. And I started turning down a lot of jobs because I was having a hard time finding a job with a firm where I could be proud of the work I was doing. And even just a year after graduating was already considering another career change just because I was feeling so unhappy, even in a place, that looks like this. And it was difficult to accept that if I wanted to continue to work in this field, it was likely that I would eventually have to accept more work that would contribute to opening areas for destructive extraction that ultimately does more harm than good for the environment. And I really wanted to refuse to accept that as my reality. That's not the reason I got into archaeology. But I began exploring different areas, and I accepted work and registered for classes in the museum field, which has so many of its own problems that I won't get into. But I always made sure to keep an eye and an ear out for field work. And while searching for field work at the start of this past summer, I reached out to some of my old contacts and another female archaeologist I met in the field on a project in Jemez referred me to my current position, which I am now fortunate enough to be with. And they are a firm, an independent CRM firm, where I have the freedom to more or less make my own schedule, something that is important to me because I'm also taking classes and working independently on a few different projects. And, you know, just as a self-proclaimed activist, being able to have the freedom of making my schedule so that I can make time to participate in different marches and protests and doing supply runs for groups that are right now positioned on the border. That's kind of a project and something I'm working on right now. But the work that I do now that I've accepted with the firm I'm at, is mostly contracted out from places like the Park Service or the Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management, even a few tribes. And the work is more about land management and preservation as opposed to unnecessary destructive development. But there is still an element of destruction, otherwise we wouldn't be working at all. And by definition, archaeology is a destructive science. But my work is more or less about where prescribed burns should happen or where the public should be allowed to come in and collect firewood. So it's been a nice headspace to exist in when I felt a lot of resentment towards this kind of work before. And one of the biggest perks right now is being able to be outdoors, even though a lot of New Mexico is still closed down. I'm still able to visit our public lands because it's my job. And when the project is a bit larger, we're able to stay in the field or camp. I get paid to hike and be outdoors and tell federal institutions that they need to find another area to chop wood. And my boss is another strong female who owns her own business and has done work in Big Bend, Death Valley, Zion. So I'm excited to be with them, and I'm able to work with a bit more peace in my mind. And that's been great for making my life feel a bit more balanced. And so that's me, I guess, a bit of what I do and where I'm at right now. Let me stop this. And I still question a lot of what I do. I don't think that will ever change. I still encounter many forms of discrimination, gaslighting, mansplaining in and out of the field. And I always feel like an anomaly, you know, and statistically speaking, I am. And learning to embrace that is always going to be a challenge for me. And I still lack confidence in some areas, in a lot of areas, which leads to some intense feelings of imposter syndrome. And I think it's because, you know, sometimes I do feel alone in the work that I do a lot of the time. But despite all of that, I love working on the land and doing what I can to protect the areas I visit. And at the end of the day, I have the right job for me right now. And I think if there were something I was going to tell myself even just a couple of years ago, it would be to recognize and celebrate those kinds of accomplishments, because they so often feel so few and far between. And no matter how many times I revise my life plan, you know, this wasn't a part of it. And so it's just kind of where I ended up, and it feels like where I'm meant to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, that's a bit about what I do.
Thanks, Monyssha. And I will add to that we are particularly happy that you are in this exact moment right with us. So thank you for that. So I'd like to open it up for questions, and we can kind of have a bit of a roundtable discussion. Monyssha and Holly, you're welcome to ask each other questions as well. I have everyone on mute, but I think I'm just going to unmute all, so you can, well, sorry, I'll turn it off so you can unmute yourself if you have a question. And if you don't mind using the raise hand function, maybe if there's a few people that have questions, you should be able to find that. If you click, I think, on the participants function at the bottom of your screen, you'll have a panel on your right, and at the bottom of that, you have a little option to raise a hand.
Monyssha, thank you so much for everything that you shared with us today, especially on Zoom and with people that you don't know, to be able to like share the things that you shared today. I really respect that, and I'm grateful for you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think having some of our email conversations, just realizing that I feel alone because these are things that people don't talk about. And I think it's important to remind people, no matter your background, where you come from, if you're a traditional student, non-traditional student, if you're going back to school, if you grew up in a small village of 300 people, you can still do the things that you want to do. And kind of like what you said, just things will work out. I mean, they do. They did,
Yeah.
So
I think that's true with incredible perseverance, though. Give yourself some credit there. And actually, I would like to ask if you guys have anything to say about how you kind of maintain that. I mean, Monyssha, you mentioned dropping out for a few years, though. Kind of throwing in the towel for a second and then deciding to go back to school. So, from that perspective, and Holly as well, it hasn't been a straightforward path for both of you. So how do you decide, to keep going forward, make that next left turn or right turn that takes you to where you are now?
Well, a big part of it for myself, I think, was really working on my confidence. And like I said earlier, I had a really close friend of mine who is a fantastic communicator. And so her and I are really close friends now. We didn't necessarily get along when we first met because we were both very strong personalities, but realizing that we were also very similar in a lot of ways, and we were able to learn from each other, kind of having her in the program with me. And then, much like Holly said, having other advisors to talk to. At UNM, for myself, it was a little more difficult because, it was hard to open up to professors about, hey, this one line in this text is driving me crazy because it's so blatantly biased and wrong. And being told that I just need to learn it. And right now I'm enrolled in classes at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And for the first time ever, I was able to go to my professor and say, hey, I'm falling behind on schoolwork because I'm really struggling with reading the text because I don't like the perspective this is coming from. I understand the information I'm supposed to get from it, but just having that support system and I think the confidence to speak up about the things that I've experienced and felt have really been probably the biggest factors in pushing me forward.
Good answer. I'm a little bit struggling with where does my resilience come from, my perseverance or tenacity. I like the word tenacity. I don't know. I think I've definitely been this way my whole life. I definitely have always had this feeling that I am capable of doing big things. But that being said, I grew up in a very small bubble in the religion and the lifestyle that my parents raised me in. And then as an adult, once I moved out, I still was in a very small bubble because I was in unsafe situations and had to deal with a lot of situations that just took up all of my time and attention, where I was focusing on survival rather than what else is going on in the world. But even in those environments, I think I still had that feeling of I'm going to figure this out. And I still feel that way. I still carry that all of the time. And so no matter what comes before me, I'm confident in my own ability that I will figure it out, or that I have a support system that I can go to help me process what's going on, and then I will figure it out. So I mean, that's not to say every single minute I have confidence. That's not how confidence works. But I definitely know I'm not going to give up. And I think that's the key. And I had a mentor that told me once that her best advice for me, and I still repeat it, is to show up and stay open. And that's it. Just keep showing up and stay open. And I think when we try to force things to happen that aren't happening, we get frustrated, or we give up, or we think, it's whatever, we stop, right? But when we stay open, then we're open to something maybe curving to the right or shifting to the left, or letting a door close and staying open because then 5 more open. And so I think that's really what I hold on to now, is like just keep showing up, and definitely through undergrad, because there were moments.
We have a question from Crystal. Go ahead, Crystal. You can unmute yourself.
Hello. So I'm also a non-traditional student. I'm 39 years old and I've gone back to school, and I'm actually getting really far in school, but I also have 2 children and a family, and I'm starting to get really worried about these higher classes because I'm a biology student and it's what I love and it's been my passion, and I really want to succeed in biology. And I have a strong background where I know I can succeed because I'm actually an analytics in my current career. But I'm starting to feel the pressure that school's going to require a lot more of my attention and requiring me to possibly like go away from my family, and I'm struggling to figure out how I'm going to support my family and do all that. So seems like Holly kind of understood how to do all that.
Yeah, agreed. I certainly have been there. Yeah, I actually did have life changes that happened. So for me, my kids were a little bit older. I was a very young mom, and so my kids were like driving and taking themselves to high school when I was going to college. So that helped. But as far like, I don't want to talk too much about my personal life, but like, I did have to make a lot of changes. I did spend a lot of time on campus and at school. I worked in a geochemistry lab in the Earth and Planetary Sciences building in addition to my classes. And I did that because I wanted and needed the experience to help me understand what it was that I was learning. And so just when you first started talking initially, I just felt like, yes, you should be concerned personally, okay? It also depends on what you want to do. So for me, I was applying into graduate programs that were going to be requiring coding and quantitative stuff that I needed to have for graduate school, and then also applying for the fellowship that I applied for. So I knew that I needed to like really show up 100% every single day because I was going to keep going in academia. If I were getting my bachelor degree and then going off to work, then I don't think that I would put that much pressure on myself. And so I think it depends on what you want to do after grad school, because your grades and your GPA aren't everything once you get your degree, right? And even in grad school, once you hit that your first semester of your senior year, that's the semester that you're submitting your applications out. And like for me, the deadlines for grad school were before you get your grades for that semester. So actually by the time I finished my junior year, that was where my GPA made a difference or not. And my senior year, it didn't. So I didn't focus as much on the grades as I focused on accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. So for me, that was like, I got really involved with advancing women in science and and some other things. And so so I think that's a big part of it. And if you have more you want to talk about, we can keep talking.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, hang in there.
Luna, did you also have a question? I saw your hand raised before.
I did. Sorry, I don't know how to use that function very well.
You did it. You got it.
So my question is more just about when you're at the end of your undergrad degree. I'm also a non-traditional student. I was away from school for several years and came back and reinvested and found reasons to be here. I feel like it's such a important time and you have such a small period of time to get things done, like grad school applications, looking for jobs, and you're still trying to finish your last few semesters. How do you prioritize? How do you decide which path is going to take you in the right direction and know how to make the right moves?
Well, I'll go first. I think
The biggest thing for me was, I mean, it was learning how to balance a lot of different things, but I think it was more or less understanding that even though I just entered my 30s, and so I'm just now, for the first time in my life, I have a job that I actually enjoy. And so I think just realizing, even as, you know, as someone in their 30s, that it's okay to kind of take your time with certain things. My plan after graduating was to also do grad school, was to immediately enter a grad program. I, much like Holly did, applied for internships at the same time. And I kind of just started accepting the things that were coming my way and being more open to having changes in this plan that I had created for myself. Because after so long, especially in my junior year, I think is where I felt more pressure. My senior year, I only had a couple classes, but you know, that is the time you're applying for grad school and summer internships and things like that. But I was still really unsure about what I was going to do, so I didn't turn down any opportunities that sounded even just remotely fun. And that's how I ended up in Alaska. And every domino that fell after that kind of just seemed to go and fall into place. And, you know, grad school went from being my 2020 goal to, you know, maybe 2023 I'll apply. And it's just realizing the only person putting pressure on myself was me, you know, so being open to other opportunities that might be out there. Because I think one of the things, even though I am taking grad school classes right now, but I think the understanding when you're ready for grad school, I think, is very important. And myself knowing I was not ready for grad school allowed me to open my mind to other opportunities. So just don't put so much pressure on yourself. You're doing great, I promise.
It's like,
thank you.
near impossible to do it. It's easy to tell other people that.
Yeah.
The what I carry is like, whatever you would say to your best friend, you're now required to say that to yourself. It's a requirement. And I think all I will add to what Monyssha said is that it's okay if you don't go straight to grad school. And I couldn't let it go. I just couldn't let it go. I'm in my 40s, and I just kept thinking the clock is ticking and I just have to get to grad school. And I don't regret that I'm here, but I'm very tired. And I think that it would have been okay to take a year. I think I would have been fine. And I was really worried about like that I was going to lose the math, or I was going to lose like that momentum, but I don't think that I would have. And now that I'm in the classes that use the math and the science that I learned in undergrad, it's a very focused, narrow aspect of the math or the science. And so it's like in one day, I'm just like right there and I've got it, right? Because I'm not learning, it's not like taking the classes again. You're just taking one aspect of it and then expanding on that. And so I really think you would be okay to take some time off if that feels right for you. But I also know what it feels like to be able to do that. So I don't know how to tell you to like force yourself, like sit on your hands or something. I don't know. But I do know that you will be okay if you do. If you can find a way to resolve that you are still successful and an overachiever and you're taking a year off.
That's really helpful, especially the momentum part. That's just been such a concern. Like once you get back into school, like if I leave, will I not ever go back? So that is really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask too if my mentors on the call had an answer for that. I was thinking of Jess, Hannah, Wade. And we can recap the question if you don't remember it.
You read a little bit. I'm sure I have things to say, but
Luna, would you mind?
Yeah, for sure. My question really just pertains to how to prioritize the different options available in the last year of undergrad and figure out if you should be applying to jobs or applying to grad school and where you should be putting your time.
Yeah, I suppose it's going to depend on what you think you want. And that's always a hard question, right? And I think remembering that neither of those or taking time off is a mistake. I think I'm one of those people who's really hard on myself too. So when I went, I'm a very traditional student. We'll go on like the other end of this here, where I was like, I'm going to go straight through and get my PhD and blah, blah, blah. And honestly, I regret it. If there's one thing that I could look back on, I wish I had taken some time off. So if that's something you're thinking about, I'm not saying that's, you know, something that you have to do, but I really don't. I think we all think we would lose momentum. But the reality is that if you really want to do something, you're going to do it anyway, because you're already doing it. You're doing it right now. You know, and everybody, you know, especially like Holly and Monyssha, like on this call, you know, are telling you these amazing stories where they've come through and they're like, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to figure out how to do it. And it's okay to slow down if you don't know which is the best turn that's coming up, you know? And I think I try to remind myself of that all the time, because even though I've gone through all this stuff already and I have my PhD, I still don't know what the heck I want to do with my life. And there's a good chance that I might not do this anymore and completely leave the field. Some days I want to go back and get my PhD in astrophysics, which was my first love. And that's why I have space backgrounds all the time, even though I'm an oceanographer. So I think just sitting with yourself and being like, what do I really like and what do I really want out of this? And then trying to remind yourself, even if you choose something that doesn't seem right, you'll just course correct. And at some point it will figure itself out, you know? So believe in yourself too. And I realize that that's very hard, easier said than done. So.
That's awesome. Thank you, Hannah. I like that course correct. I'm going to remember that. And Jess, I see you.
Hi. So yeah, Luna, I pretty much ditto everything that Hannah and everyone else had said, but I can give you a personal anecdote. My brother got his undergrad and he thought he was dead set on being a strength and conditioning coach. So he did take time off. He got his bachelor's degree and he worked for about 1.5 years and realized that that was not the life he wanted. And now he is halfway through a graduate program to become a physical therapist. So he took time off and it worked out for him really well. It was a good platform for him to kind of get into that field and see what he liked and didn't like. And he is probably one of the most motivated individuals I know. And he has like aspirations to open his own practice now when he's done and all these other things. So I don't think taking time off would hurt you at all. It could be a benefit. It's just really what you want to do. That's totally up to you.
Thanks, Jess. I want to make sure that we get to Randy's question just before we are, oh, and apparently Laura has a question as well. So we'll go with Randy first and then Laura second.
It's not really a question, but if it helps with people making decisions with finding research, like Crystal, the way that I got through a lot of my research experience is I just would email professors that I had in class and told them that I'm really interested in the topic. I'm looking for a research position that is paid, and some of them do have funding for an undergrad lab tech or something like that. And so you can also have a part-time job and you're getting your lab experience that looks really good on your applications, or whenever you graduate and you're applying to you'll be able to have your experience, you have a work experience, your graduate work experience, and you get to make some money in the meantime. It's on campus, so it's between classes. And also they also have undergrad research pipeline, so you don't have to have, you can still do the really nice summer internship, but stay local. And it has like a pipeline that the professors are in contact with other schools around the country too. So that's a really good opportunity. And for Luna, if you are still on the fence, there's a lot of post-bac programs that give you a year or two to take more courses, build a resume, maybe have that time to think about, do I really want to do grad school? It's kind of like a step up for grad school. And a lot of the courses that you do take, the credits will transfer to your grad program. So that might be, so they're like post-bac prep programs, stuff like that. Those are really helpful too. And I know a lot of people that went through that and decided academia wasn't for them, and they just went into corporate, and they still had the job experience and then maybe a little bit more coursework. Maybe if your program is going to require coding, you can take some coding classes and build that skill up. Or maybe you just spend those couple years working, and then you get into the grad program that you really had your heart set on. So that's just my little help.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. And everyone, Randy is coming up in our speaker series in, I think, November, if I'm right. And Laura, go ahead with your question.
Sure. So this is both for Monyssha and Holly. Nice to see you both. Holly, congrats. I hadn't seen you for a while, but absolutely congratulations. That's awesome. As you both were talking, I thought of this quote by scholar Thea Monnier, which is, it was directed to Black, Indigenous, and people of color students and students who are unrepresented minorities. And it is, your discomfort doesn't come from who you are. It comes from being forced to move through a system that wasn't designed for you. So my question for both of you, with that quote in mind, what is some advice that you can give specifically? And you've given a little bit, actually you've both given a lot. So I'm going to speak more on that. But if you could specifically give advice to Indigenous, people of color, or students, what is like one thing or a couple things that you absolutely would encourage, specifically thinking of underrepresented peoples going into school, going into grad school, going into your respective professions, advice that you would give to them?
Well, for me, my saving grace has really been, I was really resistant to who I was for a very long time. Like I said, I went to Rio Rancho Public Schools, and if you're not familiar with New Mexico or the greater Albuquerque area, Rio Rancho is basically the red conservative area of the area. So that's where I went to middle school. That's where I went to high school. And I spent a lot of my time just trying to fit in, even though I never really did. And so within the past couple of years, especially upon returning to school, kind of embracing who I am has been really important to me. And it's also been, I mean, definitely a struggle, but I think it's helped me feel a lot more true to the decisions that I make. And even though sometimes those are hard decisions to make, I'm able to find a lot of solace in some really great group of friends that I have. I've got a couple of friends who are also native anthropologists that I'm able to reach out to, not necessarily archaeologists in the sense that I do, but I have a couple of friends. And then there is a world of different communities on social media. And I think being able to kind of find where you belong, even if it is on a digital platform, it's been really helpful. I mean, there's a whole community of Native Twitter. There's a whole community of Indigenous Instagram. There's even a small community of Indigenous anthropologists on Instagram and Twitter. And being able to kind of exist in that space, even with just a hashtag and an image share, you know, you recognizing that these are people that you do identify with, and even though you've never met before, you're able to talk about things that you wouldn't with, you know, like that I wouldn't with a white friend who I've had for 10 years, you know. So I think finding people who can understand your point of view is really important. And I think it's something that can help you find clarity when it comes to your personal life and your academic life.
Yeah, I can say mine really short because I know we're almost out of time, but definitely find community. And secondly, work to change the structure of the system. Especially in 2020, we're definitely motivated and have momentum to do so. And it requires learning the structure of the system in order to figure out how to change it. But I think you can, what I'm doing, I don't know if you could do it, but I mean, that came out wrong. Everybody's going to do it differently is what I'm trying to say. How I'm doing it is I'm learning the structure of the system, but I feel like I'm an outsider learning the structure of the system. I don't want to learn the structure of the system by being part of the system. So I am a student at the university, but I'm very much interested in learning enough about it to say, here's a spot where we can change this. It's the structure of the system that perpetuates racism. It's not necessarily the people. All of us show up for our jobs or for school, and we're perpetuating the structure of the system. And if we're not working to actively change it, then we're the problem, right? And so this is what 2020 is teaching us, thanks to many things that have happened this year. So that's my best advice, but I really appreciate you sharing that quote. I have heard it before, but I forgot about it, and I really appreciate hearing it. Thanks for that.
Sure, and you're welcome. And thank you both so much for your responses to that.
Sure. Yeah.
I think we will leave it at that for today. Monyssha and Holly, thank you so much for your time and for your advice. I think that everybody in this room has gotten something out of that. So yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Everyone, we have another one coming up in October. So if you are not yet on our listserv, Facebook, Twitter, I'm putting them again in here into the chat. Be in touch, and we will see everyone again in October, I hope. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Mark.
We did it, and we didn't die.
You got it, Mark. Mark is one of my math teachers from CNM. That's cool. Oh, you're on mute.
Unmuted. You're still on mute.
There, we can go. I think. I don't have a camera on this computer though. I have to wait for. I have to go onto my my laptop to do that. But it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing that with all of us. It was really fun not fun, but it was really interesting to listen to you all about your journey. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Mark. Appreciate it.
Have a great afternoon, everybody.
All right, you too. Bye.
Nathan Gonzalez also just emailed to say thank you so much for letting me watch. It was awesome.
Cool.
There you go.
Nice.
Cool.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
That was amazing. While it's fresh on your mind, anything that you want me to change for next time, suggestions? Need to not forget to record. I'm going to press stop recording now. Yes.